I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, awesome. Okay, awesome. Is this? I got two. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much you guys want to hear me. 2 mics sounds a little bit of a power move. So I'm gonna just go on this one. I think audio is good. Fantastic. So guys, here to chat 5 tricks about writing better responsive search ads. Love them, hate them. They are what we're doing now. So how do we go about improving the hands that Google is dealing us, and maybe slide ourselves a few extra cards in the mix? Quite honestly, as I talk about, I speak around the world, I talk a lot about PPC. I love PPC, and quite frankly, when I talk about writing better ad copy, that happens to be my second favorite thing to talk about in all of PPC. So I've got 5 specific tricks. There are parts of this that are going to feel very marketing. There are kind of parts of this that feel very data scientist and statisticky. There are parts of it that I hope are funny. If it's not, just give me a chuckle because I need it in my life. But I do mention, I've got 5 tricks to talk about responsive search ads. It's my second favorite thing to talk about in PPC. And I say that because, of course, who I am, when you look at me and the fact that I'm in a room full of paid search marketers, I don't need to tell you guys that, like most paid search marketers, my absolute favorite thing to talk about when it comes to PPC is, of course, myself. So hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me. My name is Mark Irvine. I'm the director of PPC at SearchLab Digital. Before I was specifically managing a team at SearchLab, I had the pleasure of being a data scientist at a very large company that managed over 33,000 individual advertisers who were specifically small, medium businesses making the same reactions to data that you see when Google pushes one of these changes, when it releases a new ad type, when Microsoft makes a change, a bidding change, an algorithm change, have you. And what's really fascinating about being a data scientist isn't just the fact that my mom could go and tell everyone that her son was a data scientist and maybe sound really smart at parties. But at the aggregate, when you look at one account, you might see some trends, some anecdotes at one account, but being able to look across 30,000 individual accounts, you not just see the trends that are happening within one account, but how people respond to those, what kinds of tests and what kinds of approaches people have seen and tested at large, and really what makes someone successful when they're reacting to a change like responsive search ads. And so it was a really great role. It was a lot of, pulled a lot on my math background, and sitting in front of 30,000 ad accounts, being able to publish that kind of data, I was once recognized as the most influential person in the industry by PPC Hero and a small company called Microsoft. Now, I know, right? I like to remind Microsoft every time I have that conversation with me, whenever they're mad that I'm not spending more on Bing or something like that, that they once gave me an award. Now, I've been doing this over a decade. That's totally fine if you haven't been doing it over a decade. Quite frankly, at times, me having a decade of experience is actually a little bit of a buzzkill. It puts me in a bad position because when I first started doing PPC, I was writing ads that looked like this. For some people in the audience, this standard text ad, the 90-character 25, 35, 35 format, I can still say it off the tip of my tongue. That's what I grew up when I was writing ads back in the day. And so consequently, I originally learned there are still best practices if you do a Google search for writing ads of this format that really were focused on how do I write a headline that's 25 characters. Now, in 2016, Google blew up the industry, introduced this new expanded text ad format, 170 characters, 2 headlines, what? And then 3 years later, made a new expanded text ad format with 3 headlines, 300 characters of ad copy here that you're very used to writing today. And every single time Google made one of these changes, of course, bigger generally seemed to be better. That first change in 2016, when they gave us those extra characters of ad copy, we saw on average across 30,000 advertisers an increase of click-through rate of about 20%. And same thing, when we gave them almost twice as many characters in 2019, an increase of 12% in click-through rate. Now, Google seems to really like this 3-year cadence of updating and changing something major every 3 years, because this summer is the summer when we no longer went about writing our ads as one coherent thought, but Google made that big forced change to use a responsive search ad. So rather than going about writing one ad with 3 headlines and 2 descriptions, rather than writing one complete thought, advertisers now provide up to 15 individual headlines, individual ad assets, as well as those 14 descriptions. So rather than writing one ad at a time, they're really writing a number of individual assets and going about optimizing accordingly. It's really interesting. Although I'm going to primarily focus on responsive search ads, this kind of asset-driven ad trend isn't unique to just Google or just Google search. Microsoft obviously making the change later in February of next year, but responsive display ads are now the norm on display. Video ads use these responsive video ads. And you're seeing this more and more, that there are specifically some ventures, such as Discovery, such as Local, such as Gmail, where if you even want to serve an ad on that network or in that placement, you have to use Performance Max Discovery ads, some kind of automatic asset-driven based ad copy here today. So although I'm going to primarily focus on responsive search ads, a lot of what I'm saying is also true across a lot of these mediums. Now, of course, we're sitting here and Google made this change. We have to use responsive search ads. The question that we as advertisers, back to our boss, back to our clients, back to our stakeholders, is, are they particularly good? And a lot of us have different opinions on that. On the aggregate, I actually note that advertisers, when they make that shift, notice a small decrease in the click-through rate of their ads, a 9% click-through rate in those ads. So why would Google go about A, making this change, and B, pushing it out to everyone? And what can we as advertisers do? 5 tricks. Very first thing I can make the recommendation to is to focus on the elements of the ad that matter most. A big challenge of what advertisers do when they go about writing these ads, particularly advertisers like me who grew up writing those small short ads, is that we go about thinking too much of what can we do with that extra half, that back half of the ad. Particularly advertisers who come from a background, who had an older account that had some really good standard text ads or expanded text ads, the tendency is going to continue to write ads like you previously did. Specifically in the third headline, the second description, Google specifically notes that your responsive search ad will show up to 3 headlines and up to 2 descriptions, but it may not show all 3 headlines and 2 descriptions. So although you might intend that your ad will show like this with your entire thought on that piece of paper or in that ad, it still might show with just that second headline and that second description, or that first description. So with that, as you think about how do you go about writing your ads, and specifically writing your ad assets, your third headline and your second description actually play a unique role in the overall performance of your ad, because they may or may not show. So with this, think of your third headline and your second description as optional. Think of them as what shouldn't you include within them. And a lot of what you put in there specifically shouldn't be the best parts of your ad. Things like your call to action. If you put your call to action in your third headline, it is not going to show a solid half of the time. Sales or influential offers. If you wrote this ad and you included that it started at $79 or that it's 10% off this weekend or that there's free shipping, that is potentially not going to show. If that's your big catch, don't include it in your third headline. Legal disclaimers, of course, if legal needs to have this show up on every ad, knowing that this won't show up is problematic to be in your third headline. Similarly, vital branding. You can't, if you're Maybelline, you can't write the ad with the second headline, maybe she's born with it, third headline, maybe it's Maybelline, knowing the fact that most of the time that ad is going to just read, maybe she's born with it. And that's probably not the branding statement you're looking for. So instead, as you think about writing your third headline, use it specifically to provide complementary value props. What, in addition to your first 2 headlines, can be shown in here without necessarily taking away from a complete message in headlines 1 and 2. Think of extra keyword variety. Of course, we love to add keywords to our ads. As you think about what else you can put in your ad, this is a great place to give Google that keyword variety. Encourage Google to show that third headline. Go for a quality score, particularly in your third headline, without necessarily dumping that in your first headline. Think of, hey, as you have this extra characters, think of how can you differentiate yourself from your competitors on the SERP. There are going to be 7 ads. Everyone wrote their ad in a very similar way, which I'll get to in a bit. But how can you differentiate yourself from your competitors? What makes your business unique? Think of new flavor text. And so as you go about doing these tests, really think about all ad assets not being created equal. As we think about testing that third headline, that second description, mind the fact that even though there's a lot of opportunity, it makes up about half of your ad, all said and done in terms of character limits. Keep in mind that the more time you spend testing that is very often just not going to be a meaningful test. That when you look at that third headline, that second description, both of these ads, although there is a significant difference in the original ad itself, that they're most likely going to show without any differences in them on the whole here. So the biggest thing I'd say is really minimize the testing, minimize the focus you have in those particular assets. We very often see advertisers, when they go about testing the same ad, just with a different headline, a different description, different headline 3, different description 2, very low gains in terms of what those ads increase their performance, simply just because there's so much else to go about testing, and that very often doesn't show. So your question might be, hey, Mark, as you're telling me this ad, these headlines might not show all the time, you're using the data of half of the time they're not going to show. Mark, specifically, when will they show? Why should I go about testing this? We see that the biggest hint to whether or not Google shows that third headline, that second description, is really about both the length of the headline itself, but more importantly, the size of the screen that people are searching on. So we actually see that 9 out of 10 times on desktop, both that third headline and that second description do show. That's fantastic as you think about optimizing for that particular desktop audience. But on this mobile tablet, it's basically 50-50. Mobile, we see the fact that it shows 1 out of 3 times. That second description 1 out of 4 times on mobile. That a very small screen, it's very difficult for Google to include all that language in there. Now, this is a little counterintuitive for a lot of advertisers, because a lot of advertisers, after hearing years and years of Google being mobile first, this being the year of mobile, we know that 60-70% of traffic in certain industries is all going to be on mobile. A lot of us still think about writing an ad for a mobile audience. When you think of your third headline, your second description, you honestly want to think more about how do you use that half of your ad to speak to the minority of your audience over on desktop. So certain call to actions like call us, download this app, et cetera, things that are mobile specific focuses really isn't for you. Instead, think of this as being written for a desktop specific audience. Now, as you go about testing, again, a number of new headlines, a number of new descriptions, keep in mind that Google is going to penalize a lot of repetition in this. Penalize in the wrong ways too. If you were previously running this ad for real estate rentals in New York, it is very easy as we as marketers sit here. Google is going to let us write an ad in all of 60 seconds. You might read this and write something very similar to this, where you go about just adding in some new keywords, repeating yourself a little bit. A challenge with this is that when Google sees that third headline being repetitive of that first headline, or that second description repeating words that are already used in the first description, that Google makes a decision about whether or not it's going to show those particular assets to that user. And if it thinks that it's being just repetitive, if it's not adding anything new in it, then more often than not, Google might go about reconsidering just including a third headline for the sake of repetition. Similarly, as you go about making sure that your headlines and your descriptions don't repeat themselves, you want to be very careful that they're also not repeating words that you already have within your ad assets, your ad extensions themselves. Because that will often push Google into the same situation that if Google is deciding whether or not it wants to show these callout extensions or these site links or these price extensions or something along those lines, Google will only show those extensions if it thinks it's going to provide more value to the end customer. And so as we go about making sure that we're all of our ad assets, be them headlines, descriptions, extensions, or their new term assets, make sure that those assets are truly unique and not repetitive or redundant of your original ad copy themselves. So first bit, make sure that you're not repetitive. Make sure that your ad assets themselves are placed strategically based off of the fact that they may or may not show. As we talk about specifically partnering with responsive search ads, of course, we hit this challenge. A lot of advertisers saw about a 10% decrease in click-through rate here. And so why do, despite the fact that we have the same number of characters, the same overall approach to how we go about writing ads, why are people seeing this performance dip? And a big challenge, and I said this pretty early on, I have a decade of experience. I'd like to think that I don't show it, but I do remember growing up, and my first experience in the industry was I was working as a paid search marketer, specifically for Geico. And I don't want to date myself all too hard on this, but at the time, Geico had the slogan that it was so easy a caveman could do it. We were one of the first online car insurance places where you could get a quote completely online. You didn't have to call, speak to a human being. What a time it was to be in digital, right? And honestly, I thought that language, it was so easy a caveman could do it, is probably very descriptive of how we went about approaching digital at the time. Because we would all sit down at our desktop computers and we'd type in this caveman language of car insurance into the Google search bar, or more likely at the time, Yahoo search bar. I'm not going to get into that. But we would type that caveman language of car insurance into the search bar. And for us, if we then served them an ad that read car insurance, then caveman mind, speaking caveman language, they would see the word car insurance in that ad. It was a good ad experience. We liked it as searchers. We liked it as marketers. Google really liked it as a relevancy. It was a good quality score, right? We were all sitting around. We thought this was a great ad. And so a lot of people, maybe those of us who have been doing this for a long time, those of us who are new to PPC, probably our bosses or our key stakeholders still really have this old caveman mind of approach to doing PPC. A lot of us, when we go about writing an ad for the term car insurance, we think about the keyword for car insurance. This is probably something that everyone was taught on their first day of PPC, that hey, as we serve this ad for car insurance, we'll have an ad group. It will specifically include the keyword car insurance. We'll include this ad that says Geico car insurance, free car insurance quotes, geico.com/car insurance, low cost, low stress car insurance, get a free car insurance quote online. And then, this is what we did when I was starting out in the industry as well, is we were so smart, we knew that not everyone would be searching for the term car insurance. Some people would search for auto insurance. So let's go write a new ad for auto insurance. And let's make sure it's very specific to that search as well, so that when someone reads it, it reads Geico auto insurance, free auto insurance quotes, geico.com/auto insurance, low cost stress auto insurance, get a free auto insurance quote online. And then we now sit here and I have to explain to my husband, to my friends, to my mom what I do for a job and say that this is what I do. And no one is excited about their PPC ads and the ads that they write because it's really lame and it's really boring. And I hope not to offend anyone when they see this ad, but if you're reading this Geico ad and you're excited about car insurance and getting a free quote right now, God help you. So as we talk about this, how do we go about writing an ad that's a little bit more exciting, that's going to reach people? Because when we go about writing an ad, and we think about writing an ad for the term even headphones, a big challenge that we as marketers have to come to terms with is the fact when we go about writing an ad for the keyword headphones, that ad is going to show to everyone who searches for headphones. That's kind of the goal of PPC, right? Is we want to serve an ad to everyone on that keyword. A big challenge that we as marketers have is that everyone who is searching for headphones is an entirely different person. An audiophile, someone who cares about the quality of the music that's coming out of these headphones, cares for a wholly different product than someone who is budget-minded. An athlete has very specific concerns about whether or not this is sweat-proof, whether or not this is durable, whether or not it's waterproof if they're a swimmer. I travel a lot. I cannot tell you. Sound cancellation. Probably I very often just have my headphones on and not even listen to music just to make the sound go away. A big challenge is we're serving an ad on this keyword. Everyone is searching for this. How is it possible that with even 300 characters of text, I can write an ad that speaks to all of those individual concerns and all of those individuals' motives? So a big challenge, particularly for people who have been doing this over a long time, who which ETA it serves, that just by going and increasing the number of variations of an ad in an ETA environment, we're able to increase the click-through rate of those individual ads. A big problem that we're going to still have as we go about writing for these responsive search ads, 15 headlines is a lot. 4 descriptions is a lot. It is going to be very easy as this screen specifically prompts you to just dump 15 headlines and then it's going to optimize 47,000 different variations of your ad. You want to make sure that you don't fall into the habit of just simply changing around your wording very slightly. Make sure that these are 15 unique headlines. Because very often you will see, I worked with this car dealership. They were very proud of the ads that they had originally written and were confused as to why they were performing poorly. Given the opportunity here, you probably can't see it necessarily on this particular screen, but they read Jack Giambano Buick GMC, Jack Giambano GMC website, Jack Giambano Buick GMC, Jack Giambano GMC, Jack Giambano Buick GMC, Jack Giambano GMC inventory. Yeah, their top keyword was in the ad. I'll give them that. You know exactly whose ad you're clicking on, but you know nothing about why you would click on that ad. Of course, using a branded term is a perfect example of how this can go wrong. But even I see a lot of people who use keywords in their ads and will very often just simply switch out different keywords in their headlines or their descriptions as well to get that as well. This was for an executive advisory group that showed the ads: board member positions, board of director positions, board member positions, board of director positions, board of director positions, board member positions. Okay, yeah, I know they're keywords. They are certainly showing in the ads, provides no additional value to this. Google is going to automatically prefer this if you allow them to do it, because it will go about like optimizing for those signals that it loves so much in keywords. I would ask everyone to focus on more than just their keywords. When we look at quality score, I know that we're trying to do this for quality score. Google loves quality score. Google will take quality score and run with it if you let it. But mind you that keyword relevance is one small fraction of quality score. In fact, the smallest fraction. It's 22% of your quality score. If you go about focusing instead on your expected ads click-through rates, that's going to be a significantly faster way to improve the overall quality score and the overall performance of that ad. So what I ask advertisers to do is, as you think about writing these number of headlines, these number of descriptions, yes, I trust everyone can find a keyword to put in their ad. I'm not concerned about telling them to do that. But instead, I look at them and ask them to think about those different personas who are searching for this. As we think about that person who is writing ads for a headphone, mind the fact that, yes, you're going to have this mass market. They're going to be sensitive to price. Model starting at $25. We're all going to have a mass market audience. Think of what that mass market is, and maybe one or two headlines dedicated towards that mass market audience. But then think about that athlete, think about that commuter, think about the last minute gift giver, think about those value props that are unique to that person at that particular time. And then write an ad, specific headline and description for them, and make sure you're including them in your overall ad messaging. A big shift that we're going to have to think about is we are not doing A/B testing anymore. Testing one headline and one description, changing one word in your ad was a great way to do this when the world was a simpler place, when we were writing it so easy that a caveman could do it. As we go into the future and we think more about 3 headlines, some of them aren't going to show, 2 descriptions, they're not going to show, 18 different ad extensions, 19 as of last week. Think of device, location, all of that, different audiences, different demographics, different search behaviors. Whew. The world became complicated, and we can't necessarily A/B test in the same way anymore. Think of multivariate testing and responsive search ads are the way to do that. Now, I want to clarify a little bit of a data point that I shared with you guys earlier, because it's important, because you're going to be working with marketers who are going to be looking at the same data points. When we look at responsive search ads and their overall performance in an ad group, we did factually notice that the responsive search ads had a lower click-through rate than their ETA counterparts. That was really important to note, because all of us will see a metric go down and we'll say something's going wrong. A big reason why responsive search ads had a lower click-through rate was because they actually started serving more in those ad groups than their ETA counterparts. That as ETAs and RSAs sat in the same ad group, we actually saw that ad group as a whole would have a 14% higher click-through rate and an 8% increase in impression share. So by including these ads in your ad groups, they specifically reached a larger audience and didn't perform as well with those new audiences as our old ads did. And so it makes sense when you really stop and think about it. And as you go about writing new ads yourselves, us as humans are really good about writing ads for people who are like us, or for people who are like all of us. We are really good at writing a message to the mass market persona. We can write some banger headlines that we know are going to perform well, because that is what most people are going to care about. As you go about writing your human written ads, still prioritize that language. But what I would encourage people to do as you're using the new responsive search ads is responsive search ads are going to serve more to your small fringe audiences. And so really go a little deep in terms of who your personas are, and really use this messaging in your additional headlines so that when these responsive search ads go about serving to those audiences, you can do a little bit better. I would also encourage people over on Microsoft Advertising or Bing, there's a lot of value attributes or business attributes that communicate value out to particular customers. Things such as being carbon neutral, carbon negative, LGBT friendly, woman owned, black owned, Hispanic owned, gluten-free, alcohol friendly. There's a lot of these business attributes. I trust you guys will get the deck later that you'll be able to see, and you can apply these in at your account level settings so that Microsoft has that unique ad extension that's hidden called your business attributes. It allows you to specifically highlight that in your ad so that as someone who's searching for something and they really care about that because they relate to that, this is not necessarily going to reach your mass market audiences in the same way that your site links and your other extensions do. But I certainly care a whole lot about when I see something that is LGBT friendly or LGBT owned. And I know that a lot of other people who share these kinds of values certainly do as well. Now, 3. When we talk about 15 headlines for descriptions, I'm going to walk that back already. Less can be more when it comes to testing these new responsive search ad assets. And so, although it sounds great, Google promotes it as a value prop that by writing 15 headlines and 4 descriptions, you can test 47,000 different variations of your ad. 47,000 different variations of your ad is a lot of testing, and I might even encourage people to consider it too much testing for most of us. For small, medium businesses, 47,000 messages is a lot of messages. And by the nature of testing that many, half of them are destined to be below average. So think about limiting the number of assets that you give Google here. Google, when you go about writing it in the UI or the recommendations it's going to give you, ad strength, it's going to always push you to write more and more and more because it thinks it can do more and more and more with it. It can do more and more with it, but there is an exponential number of variations that come with small increases in these total headlines. 15 headlines will give you 47,000 different variations. Bringing that down to 10 brings you closer to 12,000. How I encourage people to think about this is truly, if you're a small, medium business, if you've got an ad group and it's not going to serve to thousands or hundreds of thousands of people every single month, keep in mind that you're probably actually better starting off in that 6-7 headlines, really only working with 2,400, 44,000 individual impressions. Start off small, test a couple of your core audiences, plus some of your fringe personas you really want to prioritize that you know about. And then as you go about getting comfort and success with those individual assets, then you can introduce more and more. You can introduce new assets to this as well. You can also go about minimizing those testing variations by pinning. We see that depending on how many headlines you have, just by pinning any headline to any position can decrease the amount of variations by 20 to 66%. And just by doing that, you're minimizing the number of variations Google can test and decreasing the amount of time that it will take for Google to find a winning variation. If you're truly concerned about the number of variations that can show, there are a number of tips and tricks to really bring this down closer to 0. If you just give Google this minimum 3 headlines, 2 descriptions, that's just going to give it 36 different variations to show. A lot of people, there's nothing stopping you from fully pinning an ad. Just basically having it serve as an ETA in an RSA format, that's just going to give you those 4 variations to show. So you can still test effectively ETAs. You can still provide Google with very human written ads that you have a lot of oversight against to give you a little bit more room to teach Google how to write a better ad. And so for this is where we're going to get like in the math heavy. We're going to talk about machine learning for a bit. One thing that people hear the words AI and machine learning, they are terms that Google, Microsoft, tech companies love to throw around to get investors excited. If we slow down and we stop about thinking about how Google goes about evaluating individual ads with machine learning, we have to think about the fact that machine learning starts out truly random. And if we give Google just the ability to go about doing machine learning from scratch to really start off being random, Google will look at ad variant A has a click-through rate of 1%, ad variation B has a click-through rate of 1.25%. Hey guys, what's a good ad here? Which is the good one? B. Yeah, Google's going to come to the conclusion that B is better, and so it's going to continue to serve B a whole lot, right? It's going to start testing B a lot more and A a lot less. If we give Google that same data It's going to start off with its RSA is completely random, but we give it some specifically human-written ads, and we believe that we as humans can write ads slightly better than a machine. Same two ads, the responsive ad variant A at 1%, responsive ad variant B at 1.25%, and a manually written ad that I created at 3%, and a second manually written ad created at 3.2%. Hey, of these two ads, which is good? None is really the conclusion. For the reason that Google will see the fact like, oh, 1.25% is nothing to celebrate. I don't want to serve B any more than I want to serve A here. It'll in fact show less of both, and it'll continue to develop and test new variants, seeing that we've basically set a bar for what is good. When we talk about machine learning, part of this is us as humans teaching the machine what's good, setting a bar for our standards so it's able to optimize against. The great part about machine learning here is that there's no limit to where we set that bar. We as marketers can continue to test those ads that we write ourselves, that if I bring the bar up to 6% because I know that I can write a better ad, I can continue A/B test this ad that I wrote myself and continue to improve this. Now when Google finally picks up its machine learning and is ultimately optimizing to new metrics like 5% or 4.25%, I've just brought the bar for what a good performing ad looks like all that much higher, to which Google is going to go about continuing to improve. So how we can do this is we can really go about either continuing to A/B test the way that we've done in the past, where we effectively still write an ETA with a bunch of pinning, and we pin all the headlines, and we only do this where it's a manually tested ad, manually created ad against another one. Or what I get more excited for is advertisers that have what I consider a safe RSA, where you went in and you provided very limited assets to it that you know will always perform well because you've written it. And then you test it against your experimental RSA, where you think more about some of those fringe audiences you identified earlier. Do they care that it's eco-friendly? Do they care that it's carbon neutral? Do they care that this product is Black owned? Do they care that this was imported? Do they care that it was made in the United States? All of those things that are certainly very important to some audiences. Do they care if it's sweat-proof? Do they care if it's low price? Do they care if it's free shipping? All of those things that are very low priority for some people, you can include in your second experimental RSA, and then you've got a standard safe RSA that you basically control the performance of because you've got very few assets in it. And so with this, what we're doing is we're teaching the machine how to learn with us. We're setting that bar by giving Google good data to optimize against. If we set that bar and we tell Google, hey, this is how I would go about writing an ad, this is what I expect to perform well, and we give Google that specific benchmark of this is the ad that we see perform well in the past, we can go about giving Google that bar so that it spends less time really sorting out the losers in this and can focus more time on optimizing its existing ad variants. Continue to A/B test those ads in your safe RSA with low assets, but test them against each other and let your RSAs really continue to play catch up with an audience that you're going to expect to be a little bit more fringe for you. Now, finally, last tip. Beyond just writing text in these ads, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, every platform out there is looking more to a multimedia experience. And so you've probably seen this before. This came out about 2 years ago, the image ad extensions. I say this, I highlight this because it's still pretty significant. Yes, you can include an image alongside your ads themselves. It is something that we actually see advertisers have fairly low adoption of, that very few people go through and fully choose to set this up. There are some specific policies that go into this, things that you have to make sure it's not watermarked. You have to make sure you own rights to the image. You can still use Shutterstock, all of that. We see that just by having it, even if it's a poor image, even if you're using Shutterstock or something generic like that, just by having that ad, that image, when it does show, we do see a 5% higher click-through rate. It's pretty significant. And it makes sense, right? Particularly when we talk about there being fairly low adoption of this particular extension. We see, quick look, hey guys, where did your ad go? Where did your eyes go on the SERP? Amazingly, it didn't go to the top result. Just because the fact that you guys probably can't see this in the room, but the very first search for concert tickets, the very first result is StubHub. The third one is SeatGeek. And then this PickPack, never heard of them, but here they are. Largest ad really takes your eyes to that middle of the SERP. We're seeing the fact that people very often, when this does show up, and particularly when they're the only ones in their industry who get this through policy, they easily stand out and they perform like they're at the top of the SERP even when they're not. And if you guys are excited about that, last week, Google made this announcement that you can now include both your business name and a logo within your ad itself. This is specifically for qualified advertisers outside of sensitive verticals. So specifically, you're not looking at health, you're not looking at medical. And this is also for people who have completed the advertiser verification process with Google. Once you complete the advertiser verification process with Google, this is rolling out in accounts currently. I believe Google has the expectation that this is going to be rolled out to everyone who's qualified by the end of November. That's not a hard date that they've posted, but they have said that they're going to be enforcing these policies for these these assets, by the end of November. So I'd say that that's a good indication of when it's going to be available. The process to get this up, live, and approved is actually very simple. You just need to submit. It literally asks you to upload a logo and a 25-character max of your brand name. That brand name has to be either your legal name that you verified with, or the name in your domain URL. Has to be featured on your landing page as well. Those who don't submit this are all going to share the same standard blue globe icon. So this is going to be something that's becoming really important in the next 6 months, that if you don't go about submitting a logo to Google, then you're going to show alongside everyone else with the exact same icon, and then other people who don't have a blue globe next to them are going to stand out. Rolling out on mobile first. If you're excited about images, then let me tell you about Microsoft. Microsoft went really deep into this over the last year or so. That, yep, you can offer image extensions. They'll actually give you the opportunity to include up to, I believe, 8 image extensions within the same ad using the multi-image ad extensions. If you love images, Microsoft would like to introduce you to video ad extensions, which would allow you to play a video specifically on the SERP itself. Or if you're particularly excited, that what they call multimedia ads, effectively including a very big, effectively banner ad at the top of the SERP with your ad copy beneath it. Those multimedia ads specifically only allow one advertiser to show a multimedia ad at a time. That multimedia ad does not displace your ability to also show a text ad. So you can, in fact, buy 2 search ads on the same SERP over on Microsoft by using multimedia ads. So treat them as complementary to your existing search ads. This is one of those things you still want to have those RSAs in your Microsoft advertising ad groups, but also include this multimedia ad in here. That way you're able to qualify for potentially both placements. And finally, I believe it was maybe even yesterday, Google fully announced this feature. But last week, Google released out of beta audio ads for people who are looking to advertise non-skippable 15-second audio-heavy little snippets for people who are streaming podcasts and music channels across YouTube, their smart devices and smart TVs, smart speakers and smart TVs. So this is one of those things you're now seeing, like the Nest, the Home, the Google Homes, Roku TVs, the podcast app, you're seeing monetization over on that front. Google is very proud to promote that this is engaging ad format because, of course, if someone is actively listening to music, actively listening to a podcast, they're going to listen to this non-skippable ad coming from their device. They report something pretty impressive of 87% of advertisers here saw a lift in ad recall, 81% saw a lift in ad awareness. So, guys, I just did the thing that I do a whole lot. I spoke for 45 minutes straight. I'm going to catch my breath for a second, but I want to do a quick recap of what I went into in depth as we talk about optimizing for these new responsive search ads. The biggest thing I can stress is that you want to make sure that the ad copy you're using is unique and differentiating. Yes, you can go about writing 3 headlines, 2 descriptions, using the words that you've used for the past 20 years. I, in fact, encourage you to continue to do this, but as you add more to this, make sure that you're using unique differentiating messages and that you avoid repetition, because Google will look at those top signals, your top keywords, and write really garbage ads for you that you're not going to be excited about. As you start out, Google is going to give you a whole lot of prompts of, hey, write a new headline, better ad strength, 15 headlines, let's go. It's not going to stop you, and it's in fact going to encourage you. I would encourage you less is more when it comes to ad assets. Consider starting with fewer headlines and descriptions. I make the recommendation to most businesses to really think of 5 to 7 headlines and really focus on nailing those first, and then slowly increasing that in time as you see performance here. Google's responsive search ad formats aren't going to perform their best when they're completely alone. If you let random run this, random will run this completely. Instead, give it some parameters, be that pinned ETA effectively or a very safe RSA to test it against, so that it has this bar for what is and isn't good performance, and it learns faster with your help. And finally, if you want to stand out on a busy SERP, you want to lean into multimedia. Images, videos, audio is really where Google, Microsoft are going to continue to place their big bets in the near future. Of course, a lot of us here as search advertisers have a lot of experience in writing ads. This would be the time to pick the brains on your creative assets, your creative teams, see what additional display creatives you can push out here for the purposes of these new image ad extensions, video ad extensions, and specifically multimedia ads over on Microsoft. And guys, with that, it's been a pleasure. My name, my email, my socials. Thank you for listening to me.
All right. All right, we got about 2 minutes for questions. I saw a hand over here. Did you get your questions answered?
I was just curious on the multimedia ads. Are they charging extra for those right now, or is it come on in and try it and get hooked?
Yeah, good question. So you're paying a cost per click basis still. If you include it, when you write this out, Microsoft will actually have a bid adjustment set for you, and the default bid adjustment they set for you is 20%. So they are a little bit more expensive than what you would generally go about seeing over on that network, particularly because they prefer to show it at the top when because they're only going to show one. They either prefer to show it at the top of the main line or over on the right sidebar. So it is a little bit more expensive, but it's not breaking the bank. It's also over on Bing where clicks are cheaper.
Thanks, Mark. Related to the beginning of your talk, does it make any sense to have 2 RSAs and pinning the second and third headlines so you can test the first headline against each other? Kind of like what you used to do with ETAs. Does it make sense now to do it?
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, you're going to get a lot of, that's going to be, what you're doing with that is you're basically giving Google the instructions of optimize the hell out of the first headline of these 15. That's actually probably a really good strategy because you're giving Google the guidance of what you care about them optimizing for rather than letting it go to the wind. I would definitely say as you go about writing that with that strategy in mind, you want to make sure that the stuff that you call out in your first headline, I'd consider that my safe group. Like I'd still only have few headlines in there because you don't want to show that you're dolphin safe or that you're donating $5 for every purchase to this particular charity that no one knows about as your first headline. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense. If you're thinking of like, how can I make big impact in here? You're effectively giving Google that A/B test of really a small number of headlines.
All right, I think we have time for one more question.
My question's regarding the audio. My question's regarding the audio ads.
Mhm.
Do you know anyone using that now or any keywords or something that we can search to trigger it so we can see what that experience is about?
Yeah, I would, if you go on the Google Ads blog or if you Google the Google Ads blog, you'll see a specific example of what they've used for their Google Fi. In fact, probably even saying that if you watch a YouTube or podcast, you probably heard the Google Fi ad a whole lot because Google was, of course, one of its first adopters of the ad format. They include a link to that. Where I have a couple of advertisers who are in beta on it, and I specifically pushed them to repeat any kind of like radio messaging that they had. So if they had, I was specifically doing it for some car dealerships that they still run TV and radio campaigns, and I really used that to mimic what they were doing over in that, so that those local audiences would continue to hear that like common language they were using.
All right, let's give Mark a hand. I'd be happy to ask, if you want to ask some questions after, I'm sure he's around for you to do that. Again, I'd like to thank you all for attending. I'd like to thank our room sponsor, Imaginuity. The next session begins at 3, so I hope you all have a great conference. And thank you for attending.